Tonight, a closer look at the administration's immigration policy. It isn't just kids in cages or separated families. Now even legal immigrants are getting targeted. And the first family in the middle of a new controversy. Then this year is turning into the summer of hell for New Jersey transit riders. If you're watching me in Jersey, you know full well what I'm talking about. Canceled trains, thousands of people stranded or late, and now it's looking like this could be a man-made disaster. Also, will Trump's base support him no matter what he does? We keep hearing that narrative. Well, we'll take a look at who these people are and whether or not they'll stick with the Donald. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks for joining us this Friday. And we begin tonight with immigration from an American perspective. Almost everyone who calls themselves an American, you can trace their roots to someplace other than here. It's that melting pot that has defined America for generations. Well, then came Donald Trump. Trump didn't invent distrust and blaming of immigrants. He just tapped into that vein, he inflated it, and he exploited it for all it's worth. It's something that we saw from before he even entered politics and moments into his presidential campaign.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Well, since his election, Trump's anti-immigrant fervor has only expanded, leading his supporters to demand the border wall, remember the one that Mexico is going to pay for, and also leading his administration to what most say is a heartless policy like separating immigrant children from their families and then locking the kids in cages. 559 of them, as we speak, remain locked away from their parents tonight. And there are more examples of a crackdown that seems to be getting only harsher. I want to bring in senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman with more. And it's like no matter how bad the press, they keep doubling and tripling down, and we've got more examples just from the last 24 hours.
And we're also starting to get a sense of what's really behind this, Rich, what's actually motivating this anti-immigrant push. But let's begin inside the mind of President Trump, who has done anything but soften his stance on immigration. In fact, he recently tweeted he'd be willing to shut down the government weeks before the midterm to get funding for a border wall and to get major changes to immigration law. So if anything, President Trump has been upping the stakes on immigration. And then there's DACA, the Obama-era program that protects children who came to the U.S. as minors with their families. Trump created a DACA crisis by ending that Obama policy, but he's been trying to claim the mantle of being a DACA supporter, tweeting repeatedly how he and the GOP are the only ones who want to fix DACA, and that Democrats who are working to protect dreamers are only using the issue for politics. But the president just chimed in on a lawsuit that would end DACA altogether. That lawsuit, brought by the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, is challenging the Obama decision to begin DACA in the first place. And if he wins the suit, the entire program would be considered unconstitutional. So how does our president, the self-declared champion of DACA kids, view this suit?
And Ken Paxton, and Ken just filed a very interesting lawsuit, which I think is going to be very successful. I hope it's going to be successful.
He doesn't just think the suit will be successful, he hopes it will be successful and end DACA. So much for that compassion for DACA kids. And so much for any compassion for legal immigrants as well. The Trump administration, reportedly led by Trump aide Stephen Miller, is now pushing for new rules that would limit citizenship and even green cards for immigrants in the United States legally. The policy would stop those processes for any legal immigrant who has used a wide range of public assistance programs they are legally qualified to use. And these changes would not need congressional approval. Under the policy, immigrants would lose those protections if they've ever used Obamacare or gotten a subsidy for an Obamacare policy or used the CHIP Children's Health Insurance Program or food stamps or other federal benefits. Benefits that, again, were legal for them to use and for which they qualified. Then there are asylum seekers, people who are fleeing violence or have a credible fear of violence in their home countries. And the chilling story of a mother and her daughter who were seeking asylum in the U.S. from El Salvador. Their case was in a Texas court yesterday. They were not. During their hearing, U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan was told the mom and daughter were already on their way back to El Salvador. Reacting to the news, the judge said, quote, "This is pretty outrageous. Somebody in pursuit of justice in a United States court is spirited away while her attorneys are arguing for justice for her." He immediately ordered the government to turn their plane around and threatened contempt charges, starting with Attorney General Jeff Sessions if the situation wasn't fixed. The ACLU, representing the pair, tweeted, "They are still going to have to fight the Trump administration's illegal new asylum policy." They're challenging a recent policy change by the Justice Department that aims to speed up the removal of asylum seekers who fail in their minds to prove their cases. So what are the rules and procedures for people seeking asylum in the U.S., or what were they before the Trump administration started changing them to make it harder for an asylum claim to succeed? Asylum claims are open to people from other countries who have been persecuted or fear persecution based on race, religion, social group, political opinion, gang violence, or domestic violence if they return to their home countries. It also says that they have a right to be in the U.S. while their claim is being heard and while they're in court. Attorney General Jeff Sessions just changed those rules, making victims of domestic or gang violence ineligible, and that was at the heart of that court hearing in Texas yesterday. But there's another legal route for emigrating to the U.S. that President Trump has targeted and been complaining about for years: family migration, or as he calls it, chain migration.
Through chain migration and through the lottery, the man that ran over people on the West Side Highway in Manhattan a month ago, 2 months ago, he came in through the visa lottery. So we're ending the lottery, we're ending the chain migration, where in his case, they say he might have had up to 24 people come in with him indirectly.
But as Trump rails against family or chain migration, his in-laws, Victor and Amalia Naves, Melania's parents, officially became American citizens yesterday. How? They availed themselves of the family migration policy, or in Trump speak, they used chain migration to become citizens. But all of that really just speaks to immigration policy and not the motivations behind them. But this week, one of Trump's top supporters gave us some insight into that motivation. Listen carefully to Fox News host Laura Ingraham and her comments about immigration, legal immigration, and the real threat that she believes immigrants pose to the nation.
In some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for, and most of us don't like. From Virginia to California, we see stark examples of how radically, in some ways, the country has changed. Now, much of this is related to both illegal and, in some cases, legal immigration that, of course, progressives love.
Legal immigration that changes the demographics of the United States. So it was okay when legal immigration brought the Whitmans or the Frenches or even the Ingrams, the Trumps, and the Naves to the United States and put us all into the melting pot. But not now when the Perezes or the Garcias or the Martinezes are coming. Hard to call that comment anything but racist, and even some conservatives agree.
I'm super not happy with that, and it's the same level of xenophobia that, frankly, my immigrant grandparents faced as Italian Americans 70, 80 short years ago. So I hope she realizes that what she said is it's against the American values that she's supposedly touting.
So to many, that sounded racist. Well, that's because it is. If you're surprised by what she said or that Trump's America is just fine with this, you haven't been paying attention. This is why he won, because there are untold numbers of people across the country, from Virginia to California, as Ingram put it, who believe their problems are the fault of people who don't look like them.
Rich?
So when I first heard Ingram's comments, which are really not just the dog whistle of what the president's been saying, but they're an echo chamber, the instinct is to say, there's just another one who's playing to the lowest denominator. But if we step back, we know people who are afraid to say, my God, in 2020, in 2040, in whatever the year, there will be a point where whites are outnumbered by other. It scares a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a choice as to how to address that. Do we say that these are all fear-mongering racists? Or do we try and understand it? If we take the latter approach, I think just history is a little bit of a guide. And you can speak for yourself. But on my side of the family, I had family relatives tell me when there were times where Irish need not apply, or Italians and dogs use this entrance. So I may look white in the whole part here, but there were not too distant times where Italians and Irish weren't welcome. You certainly can speak to where even at the height of the Holocaust, the doors were not wide open to people of Jewish heritage.
They were flat closed in the United States. Jews were turned away who were trying to flee Germany.
So what I would just say to some folks at home is, use a small prism of history. Because it's not just people coming from south of the border or, from the S-hole countries, as the president called them, from, let's say, the sub-Saharan continent. It at one point was all of us.
It's amazing, Rich, how history both informs this topic and informs us how wrong we have been throughout our history. We can come up with example after example going all the way back to the founding of this country, when a wave of immigrants from one particular part of the world came to the United States and were immediately castigated as being the problem, the thing that's changing America for the worse, and used as a political cudgel. It's happened time and time again, and we've seen it, as recently as earlier in the 20th century. The irony is that when we get a little removed from those periods, we always look back with regret at what we did and the mistakes we made, and oh, that's not an American approach to have, and we'll learn this lesson going forward, but we never learn the lesson, or at least enough time passes. And another group of immigrants come and they get blamed for people's problems in the United States, and it becomes a political tool. Donald Trump has used this more effectively than any politician, perhaps in American history.
And as you said, he's not the first who's played this card. No. But here's why I don't give a pass to Donald Trump, where I may give a pass, or if not a pass, I see where people's fears come from. I don't believe they're justified. I think they're flat out wrong. But if you look at Donald Trump, let's just look at a short prism of this man. I guarantee you with every fiber of my being that Donald Trump hires, and I know that he's trying to get visas for people to work at his properties that are not American citizens, that come from the brown countries, that he says are coming with rapist and murderous intent. But yet, he'll have them work at every one of his properties. Donald Trump, by the way, who calls it chain migration for everyone else, has his wife be able to bring in her family, and believe me, they're not the high skill set here. They're elderly couple, and God bless them, and congratulations for them being American citizens. So there's hypocrisy and there's deceit that's going on, and it's when it's convenient. And so for those farmers that he cares about, and you worked in the Texas market before, the idea that Americans are fighting to go work in the fields here, please, and I guarantee you, in his homes, wherever they be, whether it be, name the properties. Mar-a-Lago is one of them. I guarantee you he's had domestics that have watched his children, that have cleaned his rooms and everything else, that have worked harder than anybody else for him, that were not born in this country, that have come from those places that supposedly are importing nothing but danger to this country. He knows better, and that's why, to me, so much of this is so offensive. And I saw one more thing today which really drives me crazy. Donald Trump, the same guy who didn't call John McCain a war hero, the same guy who ducked the draft and didn't remember which foot he hurt while he's playing 18 rounds of golf on a daily basis, seemingly, he just pushed forward a program that for immigrants, high-skilled immigrants who are serving on the front lines for this country's military, and in some cases have done so multiple years, you have to serve between 4 to 6 years to do it. He is putting a program in through where he's going to pull the rug from out of them because they get citizenship at the end of their military service to this country. Given what he has done, or more specifically not done, to go ahead and do that to people who've risked it because of patriotism and love of this country and would be an asset to this country just shows how small and how petty and how cruel he is. And that doesn't even talk about kids in cages, DACA kids who don't know any other language than English and everything else, that he's trying to solve a problem that doesn't even exist.
It doesn't. Most of the problems that we've outlined in this segment don't exist, but they make a nice political tool, and Donald Trump knows that, which is why for him the political argument is more important than the actual policy. That's why he's fine bringing in immigrants to work at Mar-a-Lago, even as he tells people that we need to hire American before we do anything else. That's why he has no problem with Melania's parents using chain migration to become American citizens, even as he rails against chain migration. And for these soldiers who are fighting in the Army, as soon as they become veterans and avail themselves of the VA and the VA benefits, they'll, under this new policy that Stephen Miller is pushing for, be getting a benefit from the United States that will disqualify them from a green card or from citizenship. And imagine that. You're in this country legally. You're entitled to use something like Obamacare or to get or to get money from the federal government to pay for your Obamacare, the subsidy. Or you collect a food stamp, which you're, again, legally entitled to do. All of a sudden, they want to make that a disqualifier for getting permanent citizenship in the United States or renewing a green card in the United States. It's bewildering from an individual policy perspective, but maybe less so when you hear what Laura Ingraham said and it starts clicking what the rationale is behind it. It's not that it makes the United States less safe. It's not that drugs are coming from across the border. It's because it's changing America in a way that is politically palatable for Trump's base.
And I'll only say this. I have known many people on the fringes who will work 3 jobs in this country to try and do better for their kids. And if you ever have gone to a naturalization ceremony and you see these people who actually know the oath to this country, who can give the Pledge of Allegiance and mean it, and you hear there's garbage coming out from the other side, I don't believe in illegal immigration. You have to have rules and laws. But for the people who play by the rules, who love this country, to go do this from this person and this source and the Stephen Millers, we are better than that as a country. All right, when we come back, we're going to do an issue specific to the folks in the Garden State. I'm talking about New Jersey Transit. And if you're from New Jersey, you already know where I'm going. Cancellations piling up, anger building up, and now the governor pointing fingers at the prior administration. What needs to be done to solve this mess?